I heard my family planning my destruction while pretending I was unconscious. Then I started planning theirs. At 46, I believed I had mastered the delicate art of building a life worth living. My marriage to Isabella seemed unshakable after 17 years. My career provided steadily for our family, and my daughter Scarlett was flourishing in her sophomore year at university. But when I slipped on those stairs and shattered my arm, lying there in excruciating agony while my wife whispered, "This might be our chance. He's utterly useless now." We could claim he felt drunk and accelerate everything. And my daughter replied, "We'll finally be liberated." I bit down on my tongue until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, knowing that when they discovered I was fully conscious, they would receive the shock of their lives. Some background, I suppose. Me, 46, and Isabella, 42, had been bound in what I believed was matrimonial harmony for 17 years. Our daughter Scarlett, 21, was navigating her sophomore year at university with the confidence I'd spent decades instilling in her. Looking back through the lens of devastating clarity, I always assumed we were solid and not flawless, but genuinely connected. How catastrophically wrong I was. 3 decades of life experience should have taught me to recognize the warning signs, but love, it seems, makes even the wisest among us willfully blind. The past few years had been subtly different. Isabella had grown increasingly detached, her affection cooling like coffee left forgotten on a winter morning. She lived perpetually attached to her phone, angling the screen away whenever I approached, classic red flags that I, in my trusting naivety, chose to ignore. And Scarlett, who had once been Daddy's precious princess, transformed from my devoted companion into someone who could barely acknowledge my existence without visible irritation. Yet I persevered, working myself to near exhaustion with 70-hour weeks, sometimes returning home so utterly drained I could barely form coherent sentences. Still, I pushed myself to be present, to embody the husband and father they deserved. The weight of providing, of being their unwavering foundation, had become my entire identity. How could I have known that this very dedication was being viewed as weakness, as something to be exploited and ultimately discarded? Then came that Tuesday morning that would demolish every assumption I'd built my life upon. For months, 4 agonizing months, I had been pleading with Isabella to repair the loose carpeting on our staircase. "I'll handle it," she would promise with that dismissive wave I'd grown to recognize. "Don't worry about it, Christopher." I even purchased the necessary supplies myself, but she insisted with unexpected firmness that she wanted to take care of it personally. Looking back with the brutal wisdom that only betrayal can provide, that insistence should have sent alarm bells screaming through my consciousness. So there I was, descending the stairs in that vulnerable, half-awake state we all know too well, when my foot caught on that identical loose section that had been threatening our safety for months. I lunged desperately for the railing, my fingers grasping at empty air, and gravity claimed me with ruthless efficiency. The fall was devastating, my body twisted unnaturally, my arm folding beneath me with a sickening crack that seemed to echo through the entire house, my skull colliding with the wall with such force that stars exploded behind my eyelids. The pain was beyond description, beyond anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just physical agony, it was the complete obliteration of my sense of safety, of control, of the basic assumption that my own home was a sanctuary. I couldn't even summon a proper scream. Only this pathetic, gargled sound emerged from my throat as I lay crumpled at the bottom of our staircase, fighting desperately against the darkness threatening to claim my consciousness. I heard Isabella's footsteps rushing down the stairs, her voice filled with what sounded like genuine panic. "Oh my God, Christopher! Christopher!" She knelt beside my broken form, her fingers pressing against my wrist to check my pulse, her touch feeling strangely clinical. I attempted to speak, to reassure her that I was conscious and aware, but my voice had abandoned me completely. There was something in her expression, something I couldn't quite identify, that felt profoundly wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. Then Scarlett appeared, and the question she asked still haunts my dreams. What happened? Not panicked, not terrified as any loving daughter should be seeing her father crumpled and bleeding. Just curious, as if she were inquiring about the weather or asking what we were having for dinner. That casual indifference should have been my first real warning. "He fell down the stairs," Isabella explained, her voice taking on an odd, almost rehearsed quality. "I think he's unconscious." And that's when my entire universe collapsed into a black hole of betrayal so complete, so soul-crushing, that I questioned whether I had ever truly known these people at all. I wasn't unconscious. I was dazed, certainly drowning in waves of agony that threatened to pull me under, but every neuron in my brain was firing, every word they spoke was being burned into my memory with crystal clarity. They had no idea that their victim was fully aware, fully present, fully capable of hearing every syllable of their treacherous conversation. Isabella lowered her voice to this conspiratorial whisper I had never heard before, a tone that seemed to belong to a complete stranger wearing my wife's face. This might be our chance. He's utterly useless now. We could claim he felt drunk and accelerate everything. The words hit me like physical blows, each one tearing another piece of my heart from my chest. Accelerate what? What had they been planning? How long had they been plotting against me? And then Scarlett, my baby girl, the child I had sacrificed everything for, knelt down beside my broken body and delivered a knife straight through whatever remained of my soul. We'll finally be liberated. Liberated. From me. From the man who had worked himself to the bone paying for her dance lessons, her private tutoring, her university education, her spring break trips, her car, her dreams. The man who had given her everything I never had as a child. Every instinct screamed at me to leap up, to demand explanations, to confront them with the rage building in my chest like molten lava. But something deeper, some survival mechanism I didn't even know I possessed, kept me perfectly still. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted the copper tang of my own blood, forcing myself to maintain the illusion of unconsciousness while they continued their devastating conversation. How long until the papers are finalized? Scarlett asked with the casual tone one might use to inquire about dinner plans. The papers. Divorce papers. They were already in motion, already planning the complete destruction of everything I had built. 2 months, maybe 3, Isabella replied, her voice carrying a satisfaction that made my stomach turn. The attorney said it depends on whether he fights it. But if we can prove he's unstable or has a drinking problem, they were going to paint me as an alcoholic. Me, the man who consumed perhaps one beer while watching the occasional game, who had never touched hard liquor except at weddings and funerals. Did you move the money like we discussed? Scarlett's question sent ice through my veins. Money, my money, our money, the fruits of 17 years of backbreaking labor. Most of it, there's still approximately $30,000 in the joint account. I'll transfer it next week when I establish the new account. Isabella's voice carried the satisfaction of a job well done. He never examines the statements anyway. They had been systematically stealing from me, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, while I trusted them completely. I lay there on that cold floor, my arms screaming in agony, listening to them orchestrate the complete annihilation of my existence with the casual efficiency of generals planning a military campaign. They discussed my money as if it were already theirs, my house as if I were already gone, my future as if I were already dead. They talked about how much better their lives would be without the burden of my presence, how Isabella already had someone waiting in the wings, ready to step into the life I had built. Then Isabella's voice took on a new urgency. We should call an ambulance. It will appear suspicious if we don't. But even their concern for appearances had a sinister edge. Should we change his clothes first? Make it look like he's been drinking? Scarlett suggested with a kind of calculated cruelty that left me questioning whether I had ever truly known my own daughter. No time. Just grab that whiskey bottle from the cabinet and spill some on his shirt. I felt the cold liquid splashing across my chest, the alcohol burning my nostrils as they staged the scene of my supposed drunken fall. They were framing me, creating evidence of a problem that didn't exist, building a narrative that would justify everything they were about to do to me. When the paramedics arrived, the performance began in earnest. Suddenly, Isabella transformed into the concerned, devoted wife. He's been under tremendous stress lately, she told them, her voice trembling with perfectly rehearsed emotion. Sometimes he drinks in the morning. I've been terrified, absolutely terrified for his well-being. I wanted to scream, to shout the truth, to expose their lies for what they were. But again, that same instinct that had kept me silent earlier whispered that patience would serve me better than rage. Let them think they had won. Let them believe their deception was complete. The time for truth would come, but not yet. The ambulance ride felt like a journey through hell, with Isabella holding my hand in a performance worthy of an Academy Award. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed what my body already knew, a severely broken arm and a mild concussion that left me feeling like my brain was wrapped in cotton. When the doctor inquired about the overwhelming smell of alcohol, I finally found my voice. I wasn't drinking, I managed to croak. Must have spilled when I fell. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was speaking a language I barely remembered. Isabella's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but she recovered with the skill of a practiced deceiver. You were definitely drinking, honey. Don't you remember? You've been struggling lately with so many pressures. She turned to the doctor with that perfectly crafted expression of a wife at her wit's end. He doesn't always remember when he drinks. The stress has been overwhelming for him. The doctor looked skeptical, his trained eyes seeing through at least part of their deception, but he didn't press the issue. They immobilized my arm in a cast, prescribed pain medication that would keep me foggy and compliant, and sent me home with instructions to rest and recover. How little they knew that my real recovery, my awakening to the truth of my situation, had already begun. The car ride home passed in a surreal haze of pain and revelation. Isabella kept probing gently, testing the boundaries of my memory. Do you remember falling, darling? Do you remember what happened right before? Each question was a fishing expedition, an attempt to discover how much of their conversation I might have overheard. I played the part they expected, confused, disoriented, focused only on the physical pain. I only remember slipping, I told her, my voice deliberately weak, then waking up in the ambulance. The relief that flooded her features was almost comical. That's completely normal with concussions, she assured me, her voice now warm with what I recognized as false comfort. Short-term memory loss is very common. You shouldn't worry about it. How convenient for her that my supposed memory loss aligned perfectly with their needs. That night, I lay in our bed, the bed we had shared for 17 years, where we had conceived our daughter, where we had whispered dreams and fears in the darkness, pretending to sleep while my mind raced through the implications of everything I had discovered. 17 years of what I had believed was love, trust, and partnership had been revealed as an elaborate deception. The woman lying next to me, breathing peacefully as if she hadn't just orchestrated the destruction of another human being's life, was a complete stranger. When Isabella slipped into the shower, I used the opportunity to check our bank accounts on my phone, my fingers trembling as I navigated to our financial information. What I discovered there completed the picture of their betrayal in devastating detail. Our savings account, which should have contained over $80,000 money I had earned through countless overtime hours, weekend work, and personal sacrifices, now held less than $30,000. I scrolled through our transaction history with growing horror, watching months of systematic theft unfold before my eyes. Small withdrawals at first, carefully designed to avoid detection, then larger amounts as their confidence grew. Thousands of dollars of my money, our family's security, had simply vanished into accounts I had never seen, funding plans I had never been consulted about. When Isabella returned to bed, she asked with apparent concern if I needed anything for the pain. The tenderness in her voice, which I now recognized as performance art, made me want to vomit. Instead, I simply shook my head and closed my eyes, pretending to drift off to sleep while every cell in my body hummed with rage and determination. But sleep was impossible. I spent that entire night staring at the ceiling, processing not just what I had lost, but what I had learned about myself. They thought I was broken now, useless, a problem to be efficiently solved and discarded. They had no conception of what I was truly capable of when pushed to the edge of human endurance. You see, here's what my darling wife and daughter had forgotten in their rush to destroy me. I had always been the strategist in our family. I was the one who planned our vacations, managed our finances, solved problems before they became crises, thought 10 moves ahead in every situation. They had just declared war on the wrong man, and they were about to discover that their greatest enemy was someone who knew all their weaknesses, all their secrets, all their vulnerabilities. The next morning, I informed Isabella that I needed several days off from work to recover properly. The delight that flashed across her features was almost amusing. She was thrilled at the prospect of having more time to execute whatever final phases of their plan remained. Of course, darling, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Whatever you need. Your health is the most important thing. As soon as her car pulled out of our driveway, I began making the calls that would change everything. First to our bank, then to an attorney whose reputation for ruthless efficiency had earned her the nickname the Piranha in legal circles, then to a private investigator whose discretion was matched only by his thoroughness. Each conversation was a building block in the foundation of my counterattack. I played my role perfectly, more injured than I actually was, more dependent, more defeated. I let them see exactly what they expected. A broken man struggling to cope with his injury, completely oblivious to the machinations unfolding around him. All the while, I was gathering evidence, building cases, preparing for the moment when their world would collapse just as mine had. It's been a week now since that revelatory morning. A week of living with people who see me as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed, a wallet to be emptied, a life to be discarded. A week of listening to their whispered conversations when they believe I'm sedated or sleeping. A week of discovering that the depth of their deception goes far beyond anything I initially imagined. Tonight, Isabella is driving Scarlett back to university, a round trip that will keep them away for 2 full days. They have no idea that those 48 hours will mark the beginning of the end of everything they've worked so hard to destroy. They wanted me gone, wanted to be free of the burden of my existence. Well, they're about to discover that freedom comes with a price they never anticipated. I'm not the useless, broken man they believe me to be. I'm not the naive fool who trusted blindly for 17 years. I'm not the victim they thought they were creating. I'm the man their betrayal forged in the fires of absolute rage and crystalline clarity. They wanted a war. They're about to get one they'll never forget. The moment their taillights disappeared around the corner, I transformed from the defeated husband and father they expected into something they had never seen before, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. My broken arm might have slowed me down physically, but mentally I had never been sharper, more focused, more dangerously determined. Isabella's home office had always been off limits to me, my private space, she called it, somewhere she could decompress from family life. The irony was suffocating now. The key to her locked desk drawers was hidden in the most amateur location imaginable, taped under her pencil tray like some teenager hiding diary keys. Did she really think so little of my intelligence? What I discovered in those drawers shattered even my newly cynical expectations. Bank statements from accounts I had never known existed, dating back not months but years. 5 full years of systematic financial deception, each statement revealing another piece of the puzzle of my own destruction. The primary account held $147,000. $147,000 of my money, my labor, my sacrifice. But that was only the beginning. 3 additional accounts, each containing substantial balances, we were looking at nearly $250,000 total. $250,000 that should have been our retirement, our security, our future together. Instead, it had become the war chest for my own annihilation. I photographed everything with shaking hands, my broken arm making the process clumsy and painful, but adrenaline kept me moving. Evidence, documentation, proof of these would be my weapons in the battle to come. Next, I discovered a folder labeled simply S University. Inside, instead of the college paperwork I expected, were divorce documents already completed but not yet filed. The accusations listed against me read like a work of fiction: alcohol dependency, anger management issues, financial irresponsibility, emotional instability. Every single claim was a manufactured lie, but they were documented with the kind of detail that suggested months of preparation. I sat on the floor of her office, surrounded by the evidence of my own character assassination, and felt something inside me shift permanently. This wasn't just betrayal, this was the systematic destruction of a human being by people who had shared his bed, his table, his dreams for nearly 2 decades. But rage, I discovered, could be transformed into something far more powerful than raw emotion. It could become fuel for precision, for planning, for the kind of methodical destruction that they had been preparing for me. I spent the next several hours going through everything: their emails, their search histories, their text messages. They had grown careless with their passwords, trusting in my supposed technological incompetence. Another critical error in a campaign full of miscalculations. Isabella's correspondence with someone named Marcus painted a picture of an emotional affair that had been developing for over 18 months. Her supervisor at the marketing firm where she worked part-time, he had been feeding her lines about how she deserved better, how a woman of her intelligence and beauty was wasted on someone who couldn't appreciate her properly. The messages grew increasingly intimate over time, filled with promises of the life they would build together once she was free from her current situation. But it was the communications between Isabella and Scarlett that truly destroyed whatever remained of my capacity for mercy. My daughter hadn't been manipulated or coerced into this betrayal, she had been an active, enthusiastic participant from the very beginning. Messages dating back over a year showed her encouraging her mother to get rid of Dad sooner rather than later, strategizing about how to maximize their financial gain, even suggesting ways to make me appear unstable or dangerous to strengthen their legal position. I found a document they had created together, titled simply Asset Division, that laid out our entire life in cold, calculating terms. The house easy to get in the divorce, he's too emotional about it to fight hard. My retirement accounts, he probably doesn't even know how much is in there. My life insurance policy, make sure this gets reviewed before anything happens. They had even taken photographs of various items throughout our home, dividing up our possessions like generals carving up conquered territory. By 3 in the morning, I was sitting in our living room, the room where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where Scarlett had taken her first steps, where I had proposed to Isabella all those years ago, surrounded by printouts and screenshots that documented the complete dissolution of everything I had believed about my life. The next morning, I called the attorney I had researched the day before. Regina Martinez didn't just have a reputation, she had a mythology. Corporate executives feared her, wealthy divorcees sought her services, and judges respected her ruthless competence. When I spread out my evidence across her conference table, she didn't even blink. "This is either the most thorough documentation of marital fraud I've ever seen, or you're the most meticulous client I've ever represented," she said, her voice carrying the hint of a smile. "Either way, we're going to destroy them." The strategy we developed over the next several hours was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than confronting them immediately, we would allow them to continue their deception while I systematically secured my assets, documented their ongoing lies, and built an unassailable legal position. They thought time was on their side. They had no idea it was actually working against them. First priority, financial protection. I opened new accounts at a completely different bank, one where they had no history or connections. Then began the careful process of moving money not all at once, which might trigger alerts or suspicions, but gradually, systematically, like a surgeon removing a tumor piece by piece. I installed recording devices throughout the house, completely legal since I owned the property and lived there full time. The conversations I captured over the following days would have broken a weaker man's heart, but I was beyond heartbreak now. I was operating on pure, crystallized determination. When I wasn't supposedly resting or attending physical therapy, they spoke about me like I was already gone. They discussed my replacement with Marcus, their plans for redecorating the house, their excitement about starting fresh without dead weight holding them back. Isabella actually brought Marcus to our home twice while I was supposedly at medical appointments. They didn't engage in any physical intimacy, thank God, because I might have lost control entirely, but watching them sit on my furniture, drinking my alcohol, planning their future in the space I had worked so hard to provide was almost more devastating than outright infidelity. 3 weeks after my fall, I achieved what Regina called the motherlode, a comprehensive email from Isabella to Scarlett that laid out their complete timeline with military precision. They would wait for me to pay Scarlett's tuition deposit for the spring semester, due in just over a month. Then Isabella would file divorce papers, claiming irreconcilable differences compounded by my supposed alcohol abuse. They would seek an emergency court order to freeze our joint assets for my protection, push for a rapid settlement while I was still supposedly disoriented from my accident, and have Isabella moved in with Marcus before the holidays. They had planned it all, down to which furniture each of them would take and how they would explain my absence to friends and extended family. I was being erased from my own life with the efficiency of a military operation. That night, as I lay beside the woman who was orchestrating my destruction, I realized that my old life, the life of the trusting husband and devoted father, had died the moment I heard those words at the bottom of our stairs. What was emerging from its ashes was something harder, more calculating, more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. The next day, I began implementing the final phase of my counterplan. I contacted Marcus's wife, Diane, through social media, introducing myself as Isabella's husband and mentioning how much I was looking forward to meeting her husband at an upcoming company party. The confusion in her response told me everything I needed to know. She had no idea her husband was planning to leave her for my wife. I reached out to Isabella's parents, with whom I had always maintained a warm relationship, and began planting seeds about my concerns regarding our finances and my confusion about certain missing funds. I wasn't making accusations, yet just expressing the worried uncertainty of a man recovering from a head injury who was having trouble keeping track of things. I reconnected with old friends, many of whom Isabella had gradually encouraged me to distance myself from over the years. I began rebuilding the support network I would need when everything exploded, while simultaneously gathering character witnesses who could testify to my stability, sobriety, and dedication to my family. Through it all, I continued documenting everything, every lie they told, every conversation they had when they thought I couldn't hear, every dollar they moved, every plan they made. My evidence file grew thick with their betrayal, while they remained completely oblivious to the trap that was slowly closing around them. 5 weeks after my fall, my cast was removed. The doctor pronounced my healing remarkable and cleared me for normal activities. Isabella's disappointment was barely concealed. My improved mobility was apparently disrupting their timeline. I overheard her on the phone with Marcus that evening, discussing how my recovery was complicating things and whether they should accelerate their plans. Too late for that, my dear wife. Far, far too late. By the 6-week mark, I had moved 60% of our liquid assets to protected accounts, documented over $200,000 that Isabella had already stolen, recorded dozens of hours of conversations proving their conspiracy, changed the beneficiaries on all my insurance policies, secured copies of all important documents, and created a comprehensive record of their deception that would stand up in any court in the country. They suspected nothing. In their minds, I was still the same broken, trusting fool who had fallen down those stairs. They saw me shuffling around the house, going to medical appointments, struggling with simple tasks, and they felt nothing but contempt for my weakness. They had no idea they were looking at a man who had been forged into something entirely new by the fires of their betrayal. The final piece fell into place when Scarlett came home for a weekend visit and I overheard what would be their last strategy session. Isabella was growing concerned that the divorce might become contentious despite all their preparation. Scarlett, my sweet daughter, suggested they find a way to get me completely out of the picture, something about making me appear genuinely threatening or unstable, so they could obtain a restraining order and have me removed from the house entirely. My own daughter was suggesting they falsely accuse me of domestic violence to expedite their theft of my life's work. That conversation shattered the last microscopic fragment of mercy I might have retained for either of them. I called Regina that night and told her I was finished waiting. We set a date exactly 2 months after my fall, poetic justice, I thought. The day they had originally planned to begin the legal destruction of my life would instead mark the beginning of theirs. I planned the revelation around a family dinner, telling them I wanted to celebrate my recovery and spend quality time together before Scarlett returned to school. Isabella seemed annoyed by the request. She had plans that evening with Marcus, but agreed when I pressed the issue. Scarlett said she would drive down from campus for a free meal on Dad's dime. Even her greed was casual now, unguarded. The table was set, the evidence was organized, the recording device was activated, and Regina was standing by for my signal. Tomorrow evening, they would walk into our dining room expecting the same old Christopher, the provider, the pushover, the Mark they had been playing for years. Instead, they were going to meet the man their betrayal had created. And I could promise them one thing: it would be nothing like what they expected. They had wanted me gone. They had worked systematically to destroy everything I had built, everything I was, everything I might become. They had stolen my money, corrupted my daughter, and turned my own home into a stage for my humiliation. Tomorrow night, they would discover that they had chosen the wrong target for their elaborate con game. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, trust for stupidity, love for vulnerability. They were about to learn the difference between those things in the most brutal way possible. The confrontation was set. The trap was ready. Justice was finally within reach. And I had never been more ready for anything in my entire life. The dinner that changed everything started exactly as I had orchestrated it. I spent the day preparing their favorite dishes, roasted lamb with rosemary that Isabella claimed was better than any restaurant, Scarlett's beloved truffle mac and cheese that had cost me nearly $40 in ingredients, and a chocolate souffle that required the kind of precise timing that had always impressed them in the past. Every detail was perfect, every element designed to create the illusion of a man celebrating his recovery and grateful for his family's support. Isabella arrived home from work with that familiar mixture of irritation and forced pleasantness that had become her default expression around me. She made a show of offering to help with the cooking, the first time in months she had volunteered for any domestic task, which only confirmed my suspicions about how close we were to their endgame. Scarlett drove down from campus with that particular brand of enthusiasm that only emerges when free food and parental generosity are involved. Her hug felt like an actor's embrace, technically correct but emotionally vacant. The conversation flowed with the artificial smoothness of people playing roles they had perfected over weeks of practice. We discussed her classes, Isabella's latest projects at work, my recovery progress, all the surface-level topics that had replaced genuine intimacy in our family interactions. I played my part flawlessly, the grateful husband and father, slightly slowed by his injury but optimistic about the future. They had no idea they were dining with a man who had spent 2 months becoming someone entirely different. When we finished the main course, I stood to clear the plates, and Isabella actually offered to help, a gesture so unprecedented that it should have set off alarm bells in anyone with functioning survival instincts. Instead, I thanked her graciously and suggested we all sit back down because I had something important to discuss. The change in atmosphere was instantaneous. Both women went completely still, like prey animals sensing the approach of a predator they couldn't yet see. Their eyes met across the table in a moment of silent communication that told me everything I needed to know about their guilty consciences. I began casually, almost conversationally. "Isabella, do you remember the morning I fell down the stairs?" Of course I do, she replied, her voice carefully modulated to express appropriate concern. It was terrifying. I thought I might lose you. I nodded thoughtfully and continued. What exactly happened after I fell? I mean, what did you do while I was unconscious at the bottom of the stairs? She launched into the rehearsed version they had perfected, how she had rushed to my side, checked my vital signs, called for help while comforting me. The performance was flawless, delivered with just the right mixture of remembered fear and loving concern. And Scarlett, I turned to my daughter, what do you remember about that morning? I heard Mom screaming and came downstairs, she said, her voice steady but her hands betraying the slightest tremor. You were unconscious. We were both terrified that you were seriously hurt. I let their lies hang in the air for a long moment, studying their faces, watching them believe they had successfully deceived me once again. Then I delivered the first blow. That's interesting, I said quietly, because I was never unconscious. I heard every single word you said. The color drained from both their faces so rapidly I thought they might faint. Isabella's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, while Scarlett's eyes went wide with what I can only describe as pure panic. I heard you, Isabella, when you whispered that this might be your chance because I was useless now. I heard you talk about accelerating the process. My voice remained calm, almost clinical. And I heard you, Scarlett, when you said we would finally be free. Isabella tried to interrupt, stammering something about me being confused about head injuries causing false memories, but I held up my hand for silence. I'm not finished. I reached under my chair and retrieved the folder I had prepared, thick with evidence, organized with the precision of a legal document. I placed it on the table between us like a bomb waiting to explode. I spent the last 2 months discovering exactly what you meant by the process and being free. I opened the folder and began laying out documents with the methodical patience of a prosecutor presenting a case. First came the bank statements, accounts I had never known existed, containing hundreds of thousands of dollars that should have been ours together. Isabella tried to explain them away as emergency funds, as money set aside for Scarlett's education, but her voice lacked conviction. Next came the divorce papers she had already prepared, complete with fabricated accusations about my character, my stability, my fitness as a husband and father. The lies were documented in black and white, undeniable and devastating. Then came the printed emails and text messages, months of correspondence detailing their plans, their timeline, their strategies for destroying me while maximizing their financial gain. Isabella's relationship with Marcus was laid bare, along with Scarlett's enthusiastic participation in planning my downfall. With each piece of evidence, their denials became weaker, more desperate. Isabella tried tears, then anger, then bargaining. Scarlett simply sat in stunned silence, watching her carefully constructed world crumble around her. I know about the money you've stolen, I continued, my voice never rising above conversational level. I know about Marcus and your plans to move in with him. I know about the false alcoholic narrative you've been building. I know about your discussions of making me appear unstable or dangerous to speed up the divorce proceedings. When I finished laying out their betrayal in comprehensive detail, the silence was deafening. They sat there like defendants waiting for a verdict, knowing that their guilt was undeniable, but still hoping for mercy they had never extended to me. The question now, I said, folding my hands calmly, is what happens next? That's when I explained their new reality with the same clinical precision they had used to plan my destruction. They had 30 days to vacate my house, the house that, as it turned out, legally belonged entirely to me, inherited from my grandmother, and never subject to community property laws. Their attorneys had apparently missed that crucial detail in their research. I had already moved and secured the majority of our liquid assets. The courts would determine the final division of property, but given the evidence of financial fraud and deception, Regina was confident about our prospects. Scarlett's college fund, the one they had counted on me to replenish for her junior year, now contained exactly $0. I had transferred it to an educational trust that only I controlled, with very specific conditions about character and honesty that she was currently failing to meet. I would be filing for divorce on grounds of fraud, theft, and emotional cruelty, not the other way around as they had planned. Marcus's wife had been provided with copies of all their correspondence and was filing for her own divorce with a prenuptial agreement that would leave him with virtually nothing. Isabella's reaction was everything I had expected and more. She cycled through every stage of desperate manipulation, terse rage, bargaining, threats, and finally a broken kind of pleading that might have moved me 2 months earlier. "You can't do this to us," she screamed, her voice cracking with a desperation I had never heard before. This is cruel, this is vindictive, this is not who you are. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt absolutely nothing. The woman I had loved for 17 years was a complete stranger to me now, an actress who had been playing a role for longer than I could bear to calculate. You did this to yourselves, I replied with a calmness that seemed to unnerve her more than shouting would have. Every choice, every lie, every dollar you stole, you did this. Then I turned to Scarlett, and this was the hardest part. Looking at my daughter, seeing the mixture of hatred and fear in her eyes, knowing that the little girl who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories had grown into someone capable of orchestrating my destruction. I will always love you because you're my daughter, I told her, my voice steady despite the pain tearing through my chest. But I don't like the person you've become. You chose money over family, deception over honesty, cruelty over compassion. Those choices have consequences. She tried to blame Isabella, claiming she had been manipulated, that she never wanted to hurt me. But the text messages I had showed her proved otherwise, messages where she had suggested ways to make me appear dangerous, where she had calculated exactly how much money she could extract from me before I was discarded. You're an adult now, I continued. Adults face the consequences of their actions. You'll need to figure out how to pay for school on your own. Take out loans like millions of other students. Get a job. Learn what it means to work for something instead of having it handed to you by someone you were planning to destroy. The look she gave me was pure, undiluted hatred, as if I were the villain in this story instead of their victim. It hurt more than I can describe, but I held firm. The days of being manipulated by crocodile tears and false remorse were over. After that, there wasn't much left to say. I told them I would be staying in a hotel for the night to give them space to process everything, that Regina would be in touch the following day with formal paperwork, and that they should begin making arrangements for their departure. As I stood to leave, Isabella grabbed my arm with a desperation that bordered on violence. Please, Christopher, please reconsider. I made a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. I'll do anything, anything at all. We can go to counseling, we can start over, I'll change everything. I gently removed her hand from my arm and looked into her eyes one final time. There's nothing left to fix, I said, and meant every word. You didn't make a mistake, Isabella. You made thousands of calculated decisions over months and years. This is who you really are. Then I walked out of the house I had worked so hard to provide, leaving behind the family I had sacrificed everything for, and for the first time in 2 months, I felt something approaching peace. That was 4 months ago, and the aftermath has been everything Regina predicted and more. The divorce proceedings have been brutal but decisive. Isabella's claims of financial need were demolished by the evidence of her systematic theft. Marcus did indeed lose everything in his own divorce. Diane's prenuptial agreement was ironclad, and she had excellent attorneys of her own. Isabella moved in with her sister after Marcus abandoned her, discovering too late that men who encourage wives to betray their husbands rarely prove reliable when the consequences arrive. She's working at a retail job now, trying to rebuild from nothing, learning what it feels like to support herself for the first time in decades. Scarlett took a semester off to figure things out, which apparently means working at a coffee shop and living in a studio apartment she shares with 2 roommates. Her grandparents tell me she's been asking about me, wondering if there's any possibility of reconciliation. I haven't decided how to respond to that yet. The wound is still too fresh, the betrayal too complete. I'm still in the house I fixed that damned loose carpet on the stairs the day after they moved out, along with a dozen other repairs that had been too expensive or not a priority when Isabella was managing our finances. I've been seeing a therapist twice a week to process the psychological carnage of discovering that my entire adult life had been built on lies and manipulation. The hardest part has been accepting that the family I thought I had never actually existed. The love I believed we shared was one-sided. The trust I gave so freely was weaponized against me. The sacrifices I made were seen as weakness to be exploited rather than devotion to be cherished. But there have been unexpected gifts in this destruction. I've reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with over the years, people Isabella had gradually encouraged me to distance myself from through subtle manipulation and manufactured conflicts. I've rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of trying to be what they needed me to be. I've even started dating again, carefully, skeptically, but with a growing awareness that not everyone in the world operates with the same casual cruelty that had become normal in my house. There are people who view trust as sacred rather than as an opportunity for exploitation. The financial recovery has been substantial. Regina's expertise combined with the overwhelming evidence of their deception meant that I recovered not just what I had originally, but damages for their systematic fraud. I'll never get back all the years I spent working myself to exhaustion for people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be mined, but I have enough to start over, to build something new. My relationship with work has changed too. I no longer define myself entirely by my ability to provide for others. I've cut back my hours, started taking vacations, begun investing in my own happiness instead of constantly sacrificing it for people who never appreciated the sacrifice. The anger has mostly faded, replaced by something that feels like wisdom. I understand now that some people are simply incapable of genuine love, genuine loyalty, genuine partnership. They move through the world taking what they can get from whoever is foolish enough to trust them, leaving destruction in their wake without ever truly understanding the harm they cause. Isabella and Scarlett are those people. Recognizing that truth has been devastating but also liberating. I spent 17 years trying to be enough for people who were fundamentally incapable of being satisfied, incapable of loyalty, incapable of the basic human decency that makes relationships possible. Last week, Isabella called me. She wanted to meet, to talk, to discuss the possibility of reconciliation. She's been doing a lot of thinking, she said, a lot of regretting. She's realized what she lost, what we had together, how much she misses our life. I haven't decided whether to see her yet. Part of me is curious about what she thinks she could possibly say that would undo months of calculated betrayal. Part of me wonders if she's genuinely changed or if this is just another manipulation, another angle to try to get back access to the life she threw away. But mostly, I realize I don't care. The Christopher she married, the man she spent years deceiving and planning to destroy, died at the bottom of those stairs 2 months ago. What emerged from that destruction is someone harder, more discerning, more protective of his own well-being. Someone who understands that love without trust is just an elaborate performance, and I'm no longer interested in being anyone's audience. As for Scarlett, that wound remains the deepest. She's my daughter, and despite everything, some part of me will always love the little girl she used to be. But the woman she became, calculating, cruel, willing to destroy her own father for money, that person is a stranger to me. My therapist says there might be a path back to some kind of relationship eventually, that young people can grow and change, that the influence of a manipulative parent might not represent her true character. Maybe that's true. Maybe someday we'll find a way to rebuild something from the ashes of what we lost. But it will have to be built on honesty this time, on genuine remorse, rather than strategic regret, on her demonstrating through actions rather than words that she understands the magnitude of what she participated in. For now, I'm focused on building a life that belongs entirely to me, a life where I'm not constantly sacrificing my own happiness for people who view that sacrifice as weakness. A life where trust is earned rather than assumed, where love is demonstrated through actions rather than proclaimed through words. They thought I was broken when I fell down those stairs. In a way, they were right. The man I had been, the trusting fool who worked himself to exhaustion for people plotting his destruction, was completely broken. But what they didn't understand is that sometimes breaking is just the first step in becoming something stronger, something wiser, something that can't be taken advantage of ever again. I fell down those stairs a victim. I got back up a survivor. And despite everything they took from me, despite all the years of lies and betrayal, despite the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life, I'm grateful for that fall. Because it shattered the illusion that was slowly killing me and replaced it with a truth that, however painful, has set me free. They wanted to be free of me. In the end, I'm the one who gained freedom from their deception, their manipulation, their casual cruelty disguised as family love. Freedom to build something real, something honest, something that can't be destroyed by people who mistake kindness for weakness. So that's my story, Reddit. That's how falling down a flight of stairs saved me from a life with people who saw me as nothing more than an ATM with emotions. It's not the happy ending I thought I wanted 17 years ago, but maybe it's the one I needed all along. The one that taught me the difference between being loved and being used, between being valued and being exploited, between building a life and funding someone else's destruction of yours. Thanks for listening to this entire journey, for your support during the darkest moments, for helping me understand that I wasn't crazy or cruel for defending myself against people who were systematically destroying me. Your comments and encouragement meant more than you'll ever know during the months when I felt like I was losing my mind, questioning my own perceptions, wondering if I was the villain in my own story. I'm not the same man who fell down those stairs. I'm someone harder, more careful, more protective of his own well-being. Someone who understands that not everyone deserves your trust, your sacrifice, your unconditional love. Someone who knows the difference between being generous and being taken advantage of, between being supportive and being exploited. Most importantly, I'm someone who will never again mistake performance for genuine emotion, manipulation for love, or calculated deception for family loyalty. The lessons were brutal, but they were necessary, and for the first time in years, I'm building a life that actually belongs to me.